Now in this final video about cross-site scripting, let's see if we can identify the root cause of these cross-site scripting problems and how to remediate them. Just a quick reminder, my big problem is here, that I can enter HTML, hello world, which gets interpreted by the browser if it's echoed back to me verbatim. And instead of just HTML markup, I could be including JavaScript here as well to do other nefarious things. Now let's take a look at the back end of this particular script. This file is called XSS.php, so it's a PHP script. All this part here is completely irrelevant, it's all static, nothing changes in here. The script content is here in these few lines and in these few lines over here. And so what happens? We have the text area here, and what we're saying inside this text area, so this opens the text area block, and just to pull the browser back up, the blue square, that's the text area. And so what we're seeing is that if there is user input in the request that the user sent to the browser, then echo that user input back exactly the way you received it, but do it inside the text area. And so that is why, as I submit some changes to this, hello world, how are you, and I hit submit, that same text remains here. If I would not have echoed that back into the text area, this would have been a blank box. So this is not where the cross-site scripting happens. The cross-site scripting happens here, because this is the part that is interpreted by the browser. And we see that happening over here, because what I'm doing here is within a divider, so plain for rendering, I give the same question. If the user input is part of the request, then I'm putting it between TT, that's true type, or the pre-formatted fixed with letters, and I'm repeating my user input. So how do I fix this? Now let's look at the page source. Here we go, make it a little bit bigger. And so why is this a problem? Well, the problem is happening here. What we saw in the PHP, pull that to the foreground, over here I'm echoing TT, the true type, exactly without any change. That's the one you see here as well. And then I echo back what the user provided. For the browser, it looks like this has always been there. And so this H1 tag is just interpreted by the browser. The browser does not see that this is generated by program code, because that's happening on the server side. The only thing that the browser receives is one big file. And so if I can somehow take away the special meaning of these control characters, of these sharp brackets, then I can hopefully avoid the browser from doing that. Now let's take a quick look and do this manually. What I'm going to do is change the appearance here. And what I'm going to do is type %LT and %GT. So %GT. LT means less than, GT means greater than, so it's the sharp brackets. But this is called an HTML entity. It is a special control character that we can use to have HTML include characters on our web page that might not be part of our keyboard. Every letter combination has an HTML entity. Now let's save this and reload this page and see what happens. And we see now that TT is right here. It's echoed back verbatim, and the special control code is no longer there. See, this is no longer pre-formatted. And so if I can do that programmatically, if I can change all the control codes by their HTML entity equivalents, their special meaning gets taken away, and the browser will render them literally rather than try to interpret them and see what it needs to do for rendering. So let me put this back the way it was. In this case, we're using the PHP programming language, which happens to have a special function that does that. It will go through the string in the user input request, and it will replace all control characters, all special characters, anything except for A through Z and 0 through 9 basically, with their HTML entity variations. So this is now saved, and if I reload my page now you see that I'm still echoing back what I sent, but in this particular case my less than and greater than are no longer interpreted as control characters, they are now literal strings, and they're echoed back as such. If we look at the control of the source page, and we go back down to where our TT is, you see that we now have %LT less than, or there was the opening bracket, and %GT, the greater than, the closing bracket. And this signals to the browser, don't interpret this as a special control character, don't render it, just echo it back to me. And my cross-site scripting vulnerability has now been completely remediated. Problem solved, there is nothing else we can do. And the only thing we had to do was add this one little function call before we echoed back the untrusted user output, and this one basically sanitized the user output. The end, problem solved.